Hey, welcome back to Not for Sunday Mornings. My name's Steve, and I'm here with my friend Chris.
Yeah,
And
back
this
again.
Sunday, you got to do the sermon, and you did Moses.
I did. Yeah, it was fun. It was hard. There's a lot 4 books,
I know.
30 minutes.
It's crazy. In fact, you had so much material, you spent the first 5 minutes ripping on my beard or lack thereof. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well,
I don't understand that, but all right. But yeah.
you know what? I'll be honest with you. I went to Daniel. I'm like, hey, we need to do a Photoshop picture here, and the picture of JD Vance,
Yeah.
where like they shoved him out a little bit. I wanted to take your face and do that. Obviously did not get to that point, but
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good. But there will be a shot this week.
I'm
so.
sure there will be. There always is across the bow. So
No. I take what I do seriously, so I don't want to.
I see. Yeah, because you've never ripped on me. Like you don't know how many times in my manuscript I write some joke about Steve, and I never put one in there. Like it's just like a line that I leave for myself. And
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I did like some things. I got a chance to watch it on Monday morning. I was visiting family this week. It was awesome. And I got to come back, and on Monday I watched it. And so I took a couple notes, and then I got some questions.
Yeah.
And then you're going to tell us.
Yeah, let's dig through.
So one of the things I liked what you said, and this is your quote. So what ties our three scenes together? The bush, a mountain, and a tent. They're all different places, but they are all made holy by one thing, the presence of God. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then you said, this was a great line. God's presence changes everything. Even dirt becomes sacred within it.
Oh yeah.
And that was a cool line.
Yeah.
That was a really cool line. I actually stopped the sermon and wrote that one down. That was pretty clever. Yeah. So I really love those. Just the way you tied in holiness and the desire for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, you mentioned God's holiness isn't comforting, but commanding. And how do you wrestle with this tension in your own walk with God?
Gosh. Yeah. So years and years ago, we had a guest preacher here a long time ago, and so he had really talked about holiness and really getting into that. And so one of the things he said is he asked if God were to squeeze your heart, what would come out? Like if you squeeze an orange, you would expect orange juice to come out,
hopefully,
right?
Yeah.
And so he said, but what if you squeeze the orange and ink came out? And he's like, that's sin. Like that's sin in your heart. And so if God were to squeeze your heart, what's coming out of your heart at that point? And so it's hard to wrestle with. It goes again back to that. Everyone must work out their faith with fear and trembling.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so it's that searching yourself. It's that going through what is there, and the Holy Spirit will move you. I mean, if you truly seek holiness, you'll get broken. I remember after that, I got broke hard, and that was a big transformation in my life. Just realizing that, but yeah, the Holy Spirit will break you. I mean, if you really seek to be holy, and I'm not I'm not going to sit here and tell you I am. I'm not going to stand up there and tell you that I am.
Yeah.
But we're all working towards that,
Yeah.
and so it's re-examining, it's listening to what the Holy Spirit is telling you to do. It's doing those things that are moving you closer to being Christ-like.
So what does that look like? Because you said don't just avoid sin, pursue holiness. And so what does that look like in real life? I mean, how do you pursue holiness?
So I think what I was trying to get at in there is it's one thing to say well, I'm just not going to it's really easy for most of us to say, I'm not going to murder, right?
Yeah.
But Christ raised the bar on us,
Yeah.
right? And so he's you've heard it said, don't murder, right? But anyone who calls his brother Raka has committed murder in his heart, right? That's still sin, right? You're avoiding the sin. It's easy to avoid the murder. It's easy to avoid the stealing. There are things that it's easy to avoid, but it's pursuing that to a higher level. And so I think it in a certain aspect, it's following the commandments, right? And Christ put those commandments into two easy phrases, right? Number one, love your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, and number two, love your neighbors as you love yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is the steps in pursuing holiness. Is that if you can follow those commandments, you're on your way to that, because I think you think extra about it. So again, calling your brother Raka, right? the idea is like it's easy to not stab them or
Right.
shoot them or whatever, but when you're mad at them, it's not always easy not to call them a name.
Yeah, I mean, what if you call him the Rock? That'd even be worse. That'd be terrible. Forget Rocka. The Rock.
The Rock. Yeah.
You said holiness is dangerous to the unclean. And so
that goes back to that orange thing. So,
so that might seem harsh to some people. How do you explain that to someone who feels distant from God?
So this actually was something I left out of my sermon, and I wanted to put it in, but I count words, and so I was already high.
What was your word count this week?
34, maybe?
3,400 words.
Yeah.
Ooh, I do that, and I'm halfway through.
I know. I actually ended early, by the way, today.
Yeah, you were talking fast this week.
Was I?
Because I usually put you at 1.5 speed, and I could only do 1 1/4. I was like, oh, he's going fast.
That must have been it, because like I was like, and I was struggled. This was a hard sermon to give. Like, and it was hard. And I normally talk slow, and I couldn't figure out why I was ending on time with 3,400 words.
I can't know why I finished on time. I don't know. That's your job.
Yeah, well.
So how do you explain?
So I left out Isaiah, and the story in Isaiah about him being in the temple, and God is in the temple, and his throne, it's just filled with glory, right? And what are Isaiah's like first words? Woe, woe, woe is me, right? Like I am broken, and so being in the presence of God, like Isaiah being in the presence of God, like he tells you right there, I am broken, right? The idea it's like a mirror, and so God's holiness is a mirror. It reflects back on us what our sinfulness is, right? It's so pure, it's so good that just by simply being in that presence, we can't handle our own wrongness.
Can't handle the truth.
We can't. No, we can't. The truth of our like, because how many of us walk around saying like, yeah, I'm a pretty good person, right? But we're not. We're so sinful. We're so horribly sinful. Even the best person, is so horribly sinful, and in the presence of God.
And yet we're not called to walk around with our beating ourselves.
Right.
Like that's the other side of that, because
you go medieval priest, right? And they would wear hair shirts, and they would self-flog and all that. And so no, we're not called to do that. We're not asked to self, like, it's not a self-pity. It's not a self-punishment. We already know that we're wrong.
Right.
But that's where the beauty of Christ comes in, right? And just to kind of tie up that Isaiah story is he talks about how his lips are unclean, and one of the cherubim grabs a hot coal from the altar, and I was listening to something, I forget who said it, but they said usually, like, if you read all the laws that Moses has in his 4 books, usually whenever something unclean touches something clean, the clean things becomes contaminated and it becomes unclean. And when we see that story in Isaiah about the whole glory of God, the holiness of God, and this coal is touched to his lips, Isaiah's lips become clean. He becomes clean from it. It's a different transfer.
As you're saying that, I'm reminded of the story of Jesus and the lady with the blood.
Oh yeah.
And who touched him, and if she were to touch somebody, she was considered unclean, and so they would become unclean.
Yep.
And yet she touches Christ and she becomes clean.
Yeah, exactly. And so so there's this thing about God and his holiness. Again, if he is no longer holy, he is no longer God. And so
You said Moses wasn't looking for God, he was just looking for pasture. So how do we help our people recognize burning bushes in the middle of their everyday lives?
I don't know.
Or are there burning bushes?
I don't know. I mean, I think I think God calls out to us in each in its own way. I don't know what that looks like, though. I struggle with that, so I don't have a good answer for that. I think we talked about it a little bit last week. Like, I think we have a place to be. I think we have a calling of what we're supposed to do. How do you recognize that? That's I don't know.
See, we do this practice called Kairos moments, where Jesus says that the time has come, repent, the kingdom of God is at hand. And so the Kairos moment is a moment in time where it's not like a timeline where time goes, a chronos, it's a moment, a Kairos moment. And so the way we talk about it here is when something grabs your heart, maybe it's a piece of scripture you're reading, or sometimes for me when I'm out walking the path and something will grab me, it's stopping and asking, what's going on here? Is God saying something to me here? And working through a whole process of what does this mean? And
that's fair. I've always seen it from a hindsight's 2020 moment. Like I have never been aware in that moment, but I can step out time later and look back and say, oh, I get it now, kind of situation. Yeah. So it for me, it's not, I don't have a good answer because I struggle with it. I struggle with, I don't know. I don't know if I'm in a river current and I just kind of let myself get carried, and wherever I wind up. And that's, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but basically the idea is that's where I need to be at that moment.
Okay. Now, I know we normally don't talk about what you're going to talk about, but today you did tell me you're going to talk about sanctification in a minute.
Yeah.
And so I got a couple questions to get us there.
Okay.
And so the first one is, you mentioned how God got them out of Egypt, but getting Egypt out of them would take longer, which I think is a little bit of a sanctification process.
Yep.
And so what does that look like for us today, you think?
So the idea is, I think it's, and I'll just replace the word Egypt. Replace the word Egypt with America. Replace the word Egypt with culture, modern culture. We're so imbibed in our. Replace the word Egypt with the world. Like, in all reality, like, right? Because we're supposed to be. We're in the world, but we're not supposed to be of the world, right? And it's that same idea that the Egyptians were in Egypt, or the Israelites were in Egypt, but they weren't supposed to be of Egypt. They were supposed to be of God, right? Like, because you go back again, you talked about Abraham, right? And then Abraham and Isaac and then Jacob, right? And so it's that lineage, that continuation of that covenant that Christ made with Abraham, or not Christ, God made with Abraham in the Old Testament. That didn't stop.
Yeah.
And so they get to Egypt and they get stuck there for a moment, and it really is, it's just a moment, but they're so entrenched in that. And it's kind of, what's interesting is when you look at the Old Testament, they're ancient Jewish scholars, they have this concept that things repeat, that there's common themes that are always coming through, and the Exodus is that common theme, and it's repeated constantly throughout the Old Testament and throughout history, in their opinion, and in fact, you can even see it mirrored almost directly in the leaving of Babylon. Yeah, Babylon, right, and the rediscovery.
Did you say mirrored?
Yeah,
marred,
mirrored, like,
you pronounce it.
How do you say?
You pronounced it funny.
How did you say it?
Marred.
No, mirrored.
I know how to say the word mirror, but you said marred.
Oh, that was a misspeak then, if that were the case. Sorry.
Okay. I do have a sanctification question, though.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'll do my best, but yeah.
So you talked about sanctification being God's work in us, but how do we practically cooperate with that process, and what gets in the way? Or do we cooperate with that?
Well, I think you do. I think it's again, it's never going to be our actions, right? Now, that's the hard part, I think, in all of this, is it's never about us, right? So we've talked in the past.
We have choices, though.
We do have choices, and we can make those choices, but in the end, the process of sanctification is not a process that we are directing.
But we're participating.
We are participating in it, yeah. So the participation looks like, what are you doing? Like, it's not just being good; it's going that extra mile, right? It's the raising of the bar that Christ did for us, right? And where He's like, you've heard this, but what about this? You've heard this, what about this? It's that extra level. It's not legalism, which is that was the problem, that the Jewish people were practicing legalism, right? They were like, oh, here's what the law says, and I'm going to do everything I can to get around that. So, like, when it's like, oh, don't work on the Sabbath, right? I mean, you look at all the ways that they skirted that, idea of not doing anything on the Sabbath.
Well,
right?
I don't think it was to get around it. I think it was to protect them from that law, because, you know what I mean? Like, they made all these extra laws so they wouldn't come near the original law. So they made it legalist system because they were so afraid of that law.
Oh, right. And yeah. So if I made it sound like they didn't care, they weren't scofflaws. They were trying to do what they held the law in high reverence,
very high,
right? but they held it to the letter, and they didn't hold it to the spirit.
Sure.
And so I think the idea is for sanctification, the idea is about holding it to the spirit of the law, right? Because I think I said like something like the law wasn't there it wasn't there for legal purposes. It was there to teach them about who God ultimately was, right? And so if you take it as a legal, like, I have to do X and this is what the law says and this is the only place I can be with that, but it's not, that's not the purpose of it. And so they lost out on that idea. So again, you can choose to do things, right? And you can participate in sanctification because you could choose not to move forward, right? You can choose to be, I can accept Christ, right? And I can be saved and I can be, the word we use, justified and all that through Christ. But I can halt my growth. I can be what Paul says, like drinking milk instead of eating bread, right? And so I think that's part of that idea is like, if I'm not choosing to grow at all, then sanctification kind of rests at a certain point because I'm never getting closer to being holy. I'm not doing anything. It's like sitting around and growing fat, right? Yeah. Like if I'm not exercising, I'm going to gain weight. It's just the natural process of being, I'm not going to become more fit just sitting on the couch.
Yeah. Unless you take that shot, then you'll be all good in the hood. All right. So that was my questions. That was what I thought from the sermon. So what didn't make the sermon?
Oh my gosh, so much, because it was 4 books worth of information. But
4 books, and you still spent 5 minutes talking about my beard.
You know what? I did.
I got so much to talk about. Let's talk about Steve's beard.
I don't think it was 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was close.
First service, it was shorter because people actually laugh second.
Because people respect me first service. That's why. Second service, like, who is this clown? We don't even know who he hasn't even spoken in forever. Who is Steve? I'm back this week.
You are back this week.
And I got another one from you. You gave me Esther.
Yeah.
We'll talk about
that later. Yeah. All right. Biblically, names are always important.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, they are.
And they hold a lot of meaning. And so in Exodus, there are 2 names that are really important.
Okay.
Moses and God. And but this is just for fun. This is just interesting because remember that Moses gets adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter, right?
Yep.
And so the Pharaoh's daughter is Egyptian. She probably does not speak Hebrew. And so the question is, what's Moses' name? Now, there are definitely some sources that say Moses comes from the Hebrew word masha, which means to draw out, and it's in reference to him being drawn out of the
water,
water of Egypt. Yeah, and so which is beautiful because there's this symbolic nature of that name if that's the case, because what's Moses do is he draws out the Israelites out of Egypt, right? And so that name fits perfectly. But biblically and scholarly, we have to ask the question, like, is Moses really his name? What would he have been called in all honesty in the palace when he's living there? And so the question is that the word Moses is very similar to an Egyptian word, Moshe, which means son of or born of. And so this is where things get kind of fun and interesting because if you look at Egyptian pharaoh names, you have people like Tutmosis, or you have Ramses, which are Ramses. They mean born of, and then those were Egyptian gods. So the god Thoth is who Tutmosis is named after, and so he is born of or son of Thoth. Ramses is the son of Ra. The Meses is just a derivation of the son of or born of. And
many people don't know that I'm the son of Thor.
Yeah.
Sorry. Trying to keep this thing moving here.
So here's the interesting thing is Moses' name just a couple things. Was he named like there's a suggestion that he might have been named like Hapi Moses, which is Hapi was the god of the Nile.
Oh, okay.
And then it gets cut off just to be Moses at whenever we're referring to him biblically. There's an idea that maybe his name was just Moses, and he had no father, right? Because he he's abandoned essentially, and so they just name him son of, and of not of any of the gods of Egypt, which has its own beauty, right? Because he's not the son of anyone in Egypt. He's the son, he's that of God, and so it's kind of a really it's been a discussed and debated topic. You have going back to the medieval, you have going back to Josephus, you have variations on discussions of what this name actually is and means. But if you read in Exodus, it does say like it means drawn out. So again, did the writer like take that and move that into a place where it's that? Was it his name? Was that a new name that he got that we just aren't told he's renamed something?
Yeah.
Did his real mother, who was his milkmaid essentially, did she name him and the princess just said, "Yep, that's"?
Did you really just call him a milkmaid?
I don't know what do you call her. Wet nurse? I guess wet nurse is the right term. I couldn't think of the right term. Anyways,
milkmaid.
Sorry.
Wasn't that like a Christmas song? It was like 8 maids a milking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What else did make, you can tell why this didn't make the sermon.
No, right. Yeah. But it
is very cool.
Yeah, I love this. And then the other name that we get is God's name. And so when Moses first meets God at the burning bush, he says, "Well, who am I? How am I going to tell you what? Who am I telling them that is sending me?" And God says, "I am who I am." And in Exodus 3:14, and it's Ea Asher Ea, and there's a beauty in that phrase of and it's all in capital if you go and you read, right? And so there's so much that, I mean, we could spend a whole podcast just on this name, right?
Yeah.
And so the concept is like this is a self-existent, eternal present individual, right? And he is not defined by anything else. He just is. And so, I mean, because that's what I am means, right? I am is to be. And so there's also this really beautiful thing too, is in the Old Testament, the word Lord, and depending on your translation of the Bible, sometimes you'll see it, sometimes you won't. But the word Lord in certain contexts is translated as Yahweh, right? And we don't know what that word really is, because in Hebrew language, they didn't write vowels, right? And so we don't know how to say it. We don't know what it is. And the Jewish people avoided it at all costs because it's such a sacred and holy name to write the name of God. And so there was even a point where, like, if you wrote the name of God, like, you would burn the quill that you would write it with. And so there's this really cool thing that the Hebrew word Haya means to be, and it kind of relates closely to that Yahweh name. So Yahweh, even though we use it to typically translate to the word Lord, also conveys into that I am message and goes with that.
It's funny to show my immaturity. Every time I hear "I am what I am," or "I am who I am,"
you think of Popeye?
100 every time. Popeye the Sailor Man. Every time. I don't even get, like, when I'm preaching, it's like I have to fight not singing that song. I know I got a lot of sanctification to happen. Man.
So really kind of cool. We did not talk about the 10 plagues at all.
Nope.
And there's a lot of really cool stuff with that. So there is a line.
See our Revelation series.
Yeah. Well, but there's a line where God is telling during the 10th plague is telling Moses, like, these are punishments against Egypt's gods. And I think we skip over that line often, right?
Yeah.
Because if you actually go through each of the different plagues, each one is a slight against the gods of Egypt. So first plague is water to blood, right? We turn the Nile to blood. That's against Hapi, the god of the Nile. Frogs is believed to be Heket, who is a frog-headed goddess. Gnats and lice is Geb, who is god of the earth. Flies, most likely Udatik, who was the fly goddess. It was a symbol of decay.
But she was good looking.
Yeah. The livestock disease is Hathor, who was the cow goddess, or possibly Apis, who is the bull god.
Also known as a Chick-fil-A god.
And boils, Sekhmet, who is the healing goddess, or Imhotep, who is the god of medicine. Hail was from Nut, the sky goddess, or Set, the storm god. Locust, Osiris, the god of crops and fertility. Darkness was against Ra, the sun god. But the really cool one is the last one, the Passover, the death of the firstborn, because the Egyptians held that the Pharaoh was God. And then here comes Yahweh, and he comes in and he strikes down at Pharaoh. And so the one God that the Egyptians can say, I've seen this God, I know of this God, right? And the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and he strikes down at him. And it's such a really interesting thing.
That's cool.
There's been theories out there that whereas these are miraculous to a level, and I say to a level because when you read the early plagues that are sent in there, the Egyptian magicians are able to reproduce them, right? So there's a question of like, what's really happening here? But they follow each other very beautifully, and so you have like where the Egyptian Nile turns to blood, right? Well, this kills, poisons the water essentially. So the frogs, which are amphibious, are able to hop out. So what's your next plague? A plague of frogs, right? And then from all the death of what's ever in that water, you have the development of gnats, and then flies, and then flies are notorious for spreading diseases. So what do you get? Boils after that. So there's this really kind of cool escalation of what's going on throughout there. Now, there's still the miracle. There's the miracles of the blotting out of the sun. I mean, like, you can't explain that in this progression.
Right.
You can't explain the death of the firstborn in this progression. But yeah, it's in there. And then just some fun things. There's been suggestions that Moses' stepmom or adoptive mom was Hatshepsut, who was the only female pharaoh that existed. It's not common, but it's a thought about that. There's also another one that she ended up accepting Yahweh, and she actually during Passover was in with Moses.
Oh, wow.
And was saved through that.
Wow.
And so, and if you read Hatshepsut's biography, it's kind of weird because she's very short-lived. Her son actually is believed to have erased almost all of her from history, but there's evidences of her reign and her rule, and it was different than every other pharaoh that had existed. So it's kind of, there's a coolness to that, in my opinion.
There's a neat this side thing, but the Prince of Egypt, which I know you make fun of it, but it's a cartoon and it was out years ago when I was a kid. But for me, as a storyteller, there was a moment in there where Moses goes back to see his father. And there's a whole father-son element of Pharaoh and him, and it's just a beautiful, I don't know. And that's his brother, and there's all this ties in where you see a story within a story that is, I think, we miss sometimes when we gloss over all that.
Yeah, well, because we take them in chunks, right? Each story has its own little bit, and we don't really string them together in there. And my goal was not to make fun of the Prince of Egypt.
No, you weren't making fun of it.
But it's how we consume. It's just another example of how we consume biblical literature, right? We just like everything else, we like it in bite-sized chunks, and we like it in the easiest format. And
The Chosen.
Steve's
in trouble. Steve's in trouble there. I like The Chosen.
It's good. But yeah, you're right.
Choose to turn it off.
It's one of those ideas. If we can get it in a nice, easy, digestible, where we can turn our brains off essentially. Because if you sit and you read Exodus, I always kind of joke, anyone who goes through let's read the Bible in a year, Genesis done, Exodus done, and then you hit Leviticus, maybe you're starting to slow down, Deuteronomy, but as soon as you hit Numbers, you're done. You can't even make it through all of Moses' story. Most people can't, right? And so because it's hard, it takes effort to do these kind of things. And so, all right. So we had big theological concepts that it was hard to, holiness is a hard topic. I'm going to tell you that. It was not, I don't know what I was thinking when I got into it, because I don't feel like I could do it fully justice and still talk about it. I hope I did a good job with it, but
you could have used less time on my beard, more time on holiness, but that's okay. I get it.
That's all right. So so we tossed some words out there, right? We used the word holiness. We used the word sanctification was another one. And I left out a couple of words that are tied in closely into there. Justification. I think I used the word atonement maybe because it was in one of the Bible verses, but I didn't explain it really in that idea. And so I'll admit, like, I feel like I cheated a smidge because I said the process of sanctification began at Passover. And so using a very simplistic definition, if holiness is separation and sanctification is the process to holiness, right? Can we say that Passover was a way of separating out the Israelites from the Egyptians? I think it was. And so that's kind of what I leaned on. Most biblical scholars they're going to use the word substitution. Right. And so I'm fully confessing I kind of cheated in calling it sanctification, but it's really like it's hard to tease these words apart from each other because they're very closely related to each other. Yeah. And so the idea of substitution is that you put something in place of it, right? And so instead of someone dying in the house, the lamb was killed instead, right? So we substituted the life of people in the house for the life of the lamb. And then I really, and we can, I think we'll agree, like the blood on the post is super important and re-harken back on again. I use the word sanctification again, the process of being made holy. And the blueprint that I was trying to go with is like you have this substitutionary sacrifice, the lamb, and then you have the shaping of the people through the law, and then the sacrifice is that it's not. None of these are true sanctifications or part of really a sanctification. They're there to show that something has to happen. Like there's a process in God's in God's plan here that has to occur, and I dabbled into it, but really, if you take the Exodus story and you take the Book of Hebrews, like the Book of Hebrews is just telling you everything that you read, because the Book of Hebrews is written to Jewish Christians, early Jewish Christians, and who want to leave the Christian faith because it's too difficult. And it's like, no, look, you already know all this stuff that happened here in the Exodus story. Now, here it is fulfilled. Like, and I think for a long, long time in my Christian walk, I never understood what Christ meant by, I didn't come to destroy the law and prophets. I came to fulfill them. Like I didn't understand what that really meant. And if you understand the Exodus story, you understand what that sentence means. Because if you look at what the purpose behind the law and the prophets was, the law was there to work through, like it was a substitution of what the ultimate goal was, right? And I always make the argument that we are so thick-headed as humans are just thick-headed. Like we're just, God's got a plan, but he knows how dumb we are. And so like, he just has to keep beating it into our head over and over again. And so the whole like sacrifice system, the whole law and everything like that, for the thousands of years that went on for, that was just God's way of beating it into our heads. Like, hey, this isn't going to work. You need to understand that this doesn't work, that there's something that's got to be better. And then we get Christ, which is the perfect. And then it's the perfection of the Exodus narrative of what happened.
Do you think the word consecrated and sanctified, the similar word?
I struggled with that because at the base of Mount Sinai, God tells them tells Moses to tell the people, like, they have to be consecrated, right? Like there has to be this ritualistic cleansing. Like they're not allowed to sleep with each other. They had to be put on clean clothes and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a similarity in there because I struggled like, well, what's the real difference between those two terms? I think consecration is a initial step, because I still feel like in the end, sanctification is a process. It's a continuing verb. Like it's not something you do and it's over. It's just constantly moving, and we're constantly working through that. So I think to be consecrated does lend itself to a aspect of holiness. But it's not permanent. It's not, it's a step in the right direction. It's realizing that we need something there, that we're not perfect already. I think it's and so we're trying to dress up to make it seem like that, but we're never going to reach that point.
Okay. That's one. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So yeah, it was. It
was a good sermon.
I appreciate it.
You said you felt it was your weakest one. Why? Because you spent 5 minutes talking.
Yeah, because I talked about your. You know what? I'm gonna sit here and as your brother in Christ, I'm going to apologize. So I never have to hear about this ever again.
Chris is getting so mad at me because I keep bringing that up.
I think it was weak because it was a lot to cover.
Yeah.
I rewrote that ending. Like I wrote it. I finished on Wednesday, which I have been getting better at finishing early on it, because usually it takes me like the entire week to do it. And so the last couple I've been finishing on Wednesday. And then I came in Saturday and like I just set it aside. I didn't look at it, didn't want to think about it, just wanted to let it marinate there and just, it is what it is. And so when I come in on Saturday, I like to practice. And so I just go through it. Like I stand on the stage and I talk through it and everything. And that ending it didn't land. Like I struggled with it so much. So I ended up rewriting it and trying to like make it flow a little bit better. I think I felt it was weak because I felt it was cheesy. I felt it was like missing a little bit because it's hard to talk about holiness. It's hard to put what's the application? How do you, like you asked me, like, well, how do you go about sanctification?
Go be holy.
Go be holy. Be a holy nation. Like, how do you do that? It's not something that none of this is something we do. And I always feel like a goal of our message should be like to tell people like, hey, go do something, right? And my go-to is, I don't know. I felt it was kind of cheesy go-to.
How many times do you practice? Out loud?
Out loud, I do 3 times in a row. And I time myself each time. And depending...
You do it back to back to back?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I do it 3 times, but I usually do it over like 6 hours or so. Like I do something, then I go clean the bathroom, and then I come back and practice, and I move the chair. Like I break it apart a little, because each process I edit as I'm speaking. I mean, I keep my Word doc. I do it in Word so as I'm speaking, I edit. Because most of the edits happen while I'm speaking, because I hear the words and...
Yeah, I definitely see that. Most of the time, though, once I get to that final and that's what's always taken me so long, is like that I want to be very precise in my wording, right? And so like I just would spend a lot of time. And these last couple, I've realized it's not important to spend that time there. It's got to rest. Like there has to be a break in there. And so my goal is to get done by Wednesday night and say, this is where I think it's at.
Okay.
And then once I read it out loud, like it's good. Now there might need to be a tweak or whatnot. This was a big one. Like I probably spent an hour. I read it the first time. I'm like, no, I probably spent an hour tweaking the back end of it.
Wow.
Because I was like, it didn't feel, it felt chunky. It felt forced. It felt all these different things. And so that's where I kind of added in the, I didn't come to destroy the law. I came to fulfill it.
Yep.
Explanation a little bit more on what that meant. Explanation a little bit more on the veil, because that's a big idea that we don't talk about. And so, and looking into that and trying to like make that connection. Like I felt like it was a huge leap to go from where I ended and then go into this whole idea of the whole take your shoes off thing.
Yeah.
And so like trying to make that flow a little bit better into there. But when I do my timing, like I literally like set my phone up on a music stand and I just hit start and to see where I'm at. And my timing's never like, I know like the first time I do it, I might be at like 24 minutes. And the second time I do it might be like at 30 minutes. And the next time it might be 30 minutes again. It might be, and so I know if I'm in that time frame, I usually can land close to being in my set guidelines.
And you said you were at 3,500 words -ish?
Something like that, I think.
Yeah. So I did a little math here, and you spent 5% of your words on my beard. On my beard, I probably
should have done more.
5% of your words.
So many different different quotes I could have thrown in there that I avoided.
Well, now it's time for everybody's favorite segment. Or do you got anything else? That was it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
I guess we're at 42 minutes, so we're gonna
we're okay.
everybody's favorite segment. Here we go. Oh yeah. Get ready.
In the ancient scrolls, a name appears so sleek.
So sleek.
Melchizedek, the priest and king, so unique.
I had someone come up to me last week,
Yeah.
I think, and they're like, "Does Steve really not know how to pronounce that name?"
I do not. Melchizedek.
Yeah.
I just learned how to pronounce the word Acai. Acai berry?
Like the berry?
Yeah. I was calling them Akia berries.
Okay.
Acai.
Okay.
Is that right?
I think so, yeah. I don't know.
No, whatever.
What,
Anyway,
what do you
okay.
want me to say?
Okay, so give Mr. Melchizedek a moment.
Okay, so here's the Melchizedek moment is that we ended talking about in the sermon about Christ and the sacrifice that he made and being the superior. I think I used the line like he was the superior priest, right? And so really that's the whole story of Melchizedek is to point to that phrase that he's the superior priest, right?
Yeah.
If you go into Hebrews where you have in Genesis where we talk about Melchizedek, and then we go into Hebrews where he's really talked about, but everything that's talked about in Hebrews is there that to compare Christ to Melchizedek. And so in chapter 7, which is where you'll find a lot of it, the verse 18 says, "So the previous command is annulled because it was weak and unprofitable, for the law perfected nothing, but a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God." And so the idea is that that Christ is there. The law perfected nothing, but because he's in the line, he's not Melchizedek, but he's in the line of Melchizedek, that he's perfected the law. He's perfected everything. He's the better hope that's introduced as we and again as we draw near to God. And so how do we draw near to God? Through sanctification. How do we get to that sanctification? Because Christ was the substitution. Christ's actions, his sacrifice justified us. And through that justification, we reach sanctification.
That's awesome. Well, we got a week coming up. Hey, before we get to next week, do you know that I did the math, and as of right now, we have had 425 views. When you combine all of our podcasts and Spotify and YouTube, 425.
That's amazing.
I did not think we'd ever have that in my entire life. Unbelievable.
I'm
honestly.
glad people listen. I know people come up and they say they listen, and I really hope, just to the people who are listening, I'm sure most of you go to this church. Like I would find it hard that anyone else could stand to listen to us.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I mean, it's showing that you want to know more. You want to understand better.
And what do they need to do to the subscribe button?
They need to hit that subscribe button. No. They need
Smash.
smash that subscribe button. And enable notifications so you know when something gets posted.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Okay, so the upcoming week, I get to talk this week. I'm back at it. It's been a few weeks.
Yep.
And I am so excited. I'm going to talk about Cain and Abel.
Okay.
In fact, if you're watching online right now, I'm going to show you my notes here. Hold on. There they are. There are my notes. Good luck reading them or understanding them.
I know. I'm like, what does Mises mean?
I know. Mises. Yeah.
Do you misspell Jesus?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm really excited about this week. It's a fun story that doesn't have a ton of words, and yet there is so much in there, and it's been a lot of fun prepping, and I can't wait to get up and get back.
Honestly, I'm excited about it because it is. There's so much interpretation of it as you go across multiple historical documents and books, and
it's going to be a blast.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
Forward to it.
Me too. All right, so that'll be for next week, and until then, we love you guys, and we thank you.
Yeah, I'm off for 2 weeks, by the way. So if you've been avoiding because I'm preaching, come
Chris
back.
Chris is off.
2 weeks.
All right, love you guys. See you next week.
See ya.
It's Chris and Steve with the mic in hand, digging through truths that don't quite land, the bits and pieces that didn't get said, from the pulpit to the podcast instead. Not for Sunday mornings, no halos here. We're breaking it down with a laugh grab your coffee.